The day after the fire in Ridgefield, the town carried a strange silence. People whispered about what had happened in the square, about the stranger who had stepped forward when even soldiers seemed unsure. The name Marcus Gray traveled quickly, though no one truly knew who he was. At the guard post, Captain Reeves sat at his desk, troubled. His pride still stung from the way Marcus had taken control. Yet deeper than pride was something harder to ignore: respect. Marcus had seen danger before it happened. He had calmed fear with only his voice. Reeves had served long enough to know such skills did not belong to an ordinary man. He called Daniel into his office. The young soldier stood straight, his helmet tucked under his arm. "You've been watching him," Reeves said. "What do you think?" Daniel hesitated. "Sir, I think he's more than what he says. He carries himself like someone who's led men. Like a commander." Reeves leaned forward. "Do you know who?" Daniel shook his head. "No, sir. But, he's not dangerous to us." "I believe that." Reeves exhaled sharply, his thoughts heavy. Finally, he stood. "Bring him here." No more waiting. Moments later, Marcus walked into the office. His posture was calm, his eyes steady. Reeves gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." Marcus remained standing. "Say what you wish to say." Reeves studied him. "You saved this town yesterday. For that, I owe you thanks. But I cannot ignore the truth: you are not who you pretend to be. You move like a soldier. You give orders like a soldier. And you're men because yes, I believe you once had men followed you without question." Marcus's silence filled the room. His face showed no pride, no resistance, only quiet strength. Reeves pressed harder. "So I ask again, who are you, Marcus Gray?" For the first time, Marcus's eyes shifted. He walked slowly to the window, looking out at the soldiers in the yard. Their movements, their discipline, reminded him of years past. Memories he carried silently but never shared. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, but each word carried weight. "I am Marcus Gray, former commander of Delta Force." The room went still. Daniel's eyes widened in shock. Reeves's expression hardened, though not from disbelief, rather from the realization of what stood before him. "You?" Reeves asked quietly. "Yes," Marcus replied. "For 15 years, I led men into places most people will never know exist. Missions unspoken, victories unseen. I carried their lives on my shoulders, and I carry them still." Daniel stepped forward, his voice full of awe. "Delta Force, that's the highest." "Sir, you were—" Marcus lifted a hand gently, stopping him. "I was a soldier, Daniel. Nothing more. Titles mean little compared to the weight of memory." Reeves stared at him, conflicted. He had doubted Marcus, even mistrusted him, and yet here stood a man whose service outshone his own. A man who had already proven his skill and calm in crisis. "Why hide it?" Reeves asked finally. Marcus turned back to face him. His eyes held a deep sadness. "Because I did not come here to be remembered as a soldier. I came here to find peace. To live as a man, not as a weapon." Daniel's voice broke softly. "But sir, your presence changes everything. People deserve to know." Marcus shook his head. "What people deserve is safety, not the shadow of my past. My men and I did what we had to do, and that chapter is closed. I seek no honor, no recognition. Only quiet." Reeves leaned back, his thoughts tangled. "You realize," he said slowly, "if others learn the truth, they will not leave you in peace. A man like you, people will always want you to serve again." Marcus's gaze softened, yet remained firm. "Then I will face it, as I always have. But I will not volunteer my past. Let it remain where it belongs." The silence stretched. Daniel looked between the two men, his heart heavy with respect for Marcus. He had dreamed of courage, dreamed of leading, and here before him was the living example of what that meant, not loud, not proud, but steady, humble, and unshaken. Finally, Reeves spoke again. His voice carried less suspicion now, more respect. You've given me reason to see you differently. But I still have my duty. I cannot allow a man with your past to walk freely without some kind of watch. Marcus nodded once. Do what you must, Captain. I will not resist. Reeves studied him, almost expecting defiance. But Marcus stood calm, accepting, as though nothing in the world could disturb his center. That calm unsettled Reeves more than anything else. When Marcus left the office, Daniel followed him into the evening air. The young soldier looked at him with new eyes. Commander Gray, Daniel said softly, almost reverently. Marcus turned, his expression kind but firm. No, Daniel. Just Marcus. Remember me that way. The boy nodded, though the name burned into his heart all the same. As the sun set over Ridgefield, the truth was now known at least to a few. Marcus Gray was not the stranger people thought. He was a man who had walked through shadows and carried burdens too heavy to name. A man whose silence hid stories of sacrifice beyond measure. And though he longed for peace, fate had already begun to stir. His past was no longer hidden. And soon, the whole town and perhaps beyond would know the truth. The evening air in the small town of Ridgefield was quiet, touched by the sound of crickets and the faint hum of trucks moving along the main road. People had grown uneasy these past weeks, with National Guard soldiers patrolling the streets after a series of strange disturbances. Curfews were set, and almost every new face drew cautious eyes. Among those walking through the town that night was Marcus, a tall man with steady eyes and a calm step. He wore a simple dark jacket, a plain shirt, and boots worn down from many long journeys. His skin was deep brown, his posture strong, yet his face gentle. He moved as if he had carried many burdens, though he never spoke of them. Marcus had returned to Ridgefield after many years away. Few people in town knew his name, and fewer still remembered his face. He walked with purpose, not rushing, not slowing, simply moving toward the small inn at the edge of the street. His heart longed for quiet. Yet, in a place where suspicion grew faster than trust, his presence drew attention. From across the street, two National Guard soldiers stood near their vehicle, watching. One nudged the other and pointed. Marcus noticed them, but he kept walking, his head slightly lowered. He had learned long ago not to show offense at a stranger's stare. Inside, however, he felt the old weight of judgment pressing against him. He had worn medals on his chest in countries far away, led men through shadows where danger lived in every corner, yet here, in his own homeland, he was seen as only a stranger, perhaps even a threat. He sighed quietly but kept his calm. "Evening, sir," one of the soldiers called out as Marcus stepped closer. His voice carried a firmness that was meant to sound polite but held suspicion beneath. Marcus stopped. He lifted his head, looked at the young soldier, and answered in a steady tone. "Evening." The second soldier shifted his rifle against his vest. His eyes narrowed. "We haven't seen you around here. Mind telling us where you're headed?" Marcus kept his voice calm. "To the inn. Just looking for a place to rest." His answer was simple, but the way the soldiers exchanged glances told him they were not satisfied. They looked at his boots, his jacket, the small backpack slung over his shoulder. In their eyes, each detail was a reason to question him more. One of them stepped closer. "What's in the bag?" Marcus did not move. "Just personal things." The soldier's voice tightened. "We need to be careful these days. People get nervous when strangers walk around at night. You understand?" Marcus looked at him for a moment. His eyes were not hard, not angry, Only steady. I understand. The silence between them stretched. For a moment, only the sound of wind through the trees filled the space. Marcus thought about the irony how many times he had stood in another country, watching people look at him as a stranger, and how now, in his own land, the same story repeated. Yet Marcus did not let his frustration show. Years of discipline had taught him the power of patience. He knew the soldiers were young, perhaps just following orders, perhaps just afraid. Fear often dressed itself as suspicion. One of the soldiers finally spoke again. "We'll walk you to the inn. Just a routine check." Marcus gave a small nod. "Very well." They walked together down the quiet street. A few townspeople peered from their windows, whispering at the sight. The soldiers stayed alert, their eyes scanning Marcus as though expecting him to reveal some hidden danger. But Marcus kept his calm step, his hands at his sides, his breathing even. Inside, memories stirred. He remembered the long nights in faraway deserts, the storms in foreign jungles, the silent moments before missions that could decide life or death. He remembered the faces of the men he had led, young and uncertain, who had looked to him for strength. He had given them everything he had. He had carried the weight of command, made decisions that still echoed in his heart. And yet, none of that showed on his face as he walked through Ridgefield under the watch of strangers. To them, he was only a man they did not know. When they reached the inn, Marcus paused at the steps. The soldiers looked at him one last time, still unsure. "You can go inside," one finally said. "But stay available. We may have more questions." Marcus gave a polite nod. "Understood." As he stepped into the inn, he felt the eyes of the soldiers still on his back. He carried no anger, but there was a quiet ache inside him. He had fought to protect people like them, to give them safety. And yet, they could not see him for who he truly was. He set his bag down in the small room, sat on the edge of the bed, and let out a slow breath. He had returned seeking peace, but peace, it seemed, was not easily found. Still, Marcus told himself, patience would reveal all things in time. And though the soldiers did not know it yet, they had not met an ordinary traveler. They had crossed paths with a man whose strength and story went far deeper than appearances. And sooner or later, the truth would come to light. The morning sun spilled across Ridgefield, painting the streets with gold. Marcus rose early, as he always did, his habits unbroken even after years away from service. Discipline lived inside him, steady as his breath. He washed, dressed simply, and stepped outside the small inn to walk the quiet road. The town was awake now. Shopkeepers unlocked their doors, and children hurried toward the small schoolhouse. Yet wherever Marcus went, he felt the glances. Some eyes were curious, others cautious. Few offered smiles. He walked calmly, not asking for attention, but attention seemed to follow him anyway. The National Guard was still stationed at the corners. Their vehicles, painted in dull green, stood like reminders of unrest. The soldiers shifted in their posts, their young faces drawn with duty and fatigue. Marcus noticed them watching again. He kept his pace steady, his gaze soft, neither inviting nor avoiding their eyes. He moved toward a small diner on the corner. The bell above the door rang gently as he stepped in. Inside, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filled the air. A middle-aged woman behind the counter looked up. Her name was Clara, and she had worked in that diner for 20 years. She froze for just a moment when she saw Marcus, but then offered a cautious smile. "Morning," she said. "Morning," Marcus replied quietly. He chose a seat near the window. Clara poured him coffee and placed it on the table. "You passing through town?" she asked, her voice carrying polite curiosity. "For now," Marcus said. "Just looking for rest." She nodded, though her eyes searched his face. Something in his calm presence unsettled her, though not in fear. It was the kind of stillness that hinted at untold stories. Outside, two soldiers lingered by the window, still watching. Clara noticed them and shook her head softly. "Seems they're keeping a close eye on you." Marcus lifted the cup and sipped, his expression unreadable. "Yes," he said at last. "They are." Before more could be spoken, the diner door opened again, and 3 National Guard soldiers entered. Their boots thudded against the wooden floor, their presence heavy. The youngest among them, a man barely in his 20s, looked nervous. The one in front carried himself with authority. "Morning," he said firmly, walking straight to Marcus's table. "We'll need to ask you a few more questions." Clara's eyes widened. "Is this really necessary? He's just having breakfast." The soldier ignored her. His gaze remained locked on Marcus. Marcus set down his cup slowly. His voice stayed calm. "Of course. Ask what you will." The soldier pulled out a chair and sat opposite him, the others standing close by. "Name," he demanded. "Marcus," he answered evenly. "Full name." "Marcus Gray." The soldier studied him, waiting for more, but Marcus gave nothing beyond that. "Where are you from?" Marcus's eyes softened as though remembering distant places. "Many places." The soldier frowned. "That's not an answer." "It's the truth," Marcus said quietly. The youngest soldier shifted uncomfortably. He looked at Marcus differently than the others, almost with respect, though he didn't know why. The leader leaned forward. "People in this town are nervous. We're here to protect them. So when someone shows up we don't know, we need to be sure. You understand?" Marcus met his eyes. "I understand." "Then help us understand you." Marcus remained silent for a long moment. His fingers tapped once against the cup, a small rhythm that calmed him. Then he said, "Sometimes, the best way to understand a man is not by the answers he gives, but by the way he carries himself." The soldier blinked, unsettled by the weight of those words. He wanted to press harder, but something about Marcus's calm gaze stopped him. It was as if Marcus could see through him, reading the fear and the duty that warred inside. Finally, the soldier stood. "We'll be watching. Don't leave town without telling us." Marcus gave a single nod. "Very well." The soldiers left, their boots heavy against the floor. Clara let out a sigh of relief once the door closed. "They don't usually go that far," she muttered. "I don't know what it is about you, but you've shaken them." Marcus gave a small, gentle smile. "It isn't me they fear. It is what they do not know." He finished his coffee, left payment on the table, and stood. Clara watched him leave with a thoughtful expression, sensing there was far more to this quiet man than anyone realized. Outside, Marcus walked again through the streets, feeling the weight of eyes upon him. He did not rush. He had faced storms fiercer than suspicion, battles harder than mistrust. Yet this quiet battle of perception touched him in a way he had not expected. As he turned a corner, the youngest soldier, the one who had looked at him differently, stood waiting. His name was Daniel, and he held his helmet under his arm. He hesitated before speaking. "Sir," Daniel said softly, almost whispering so the others would not hear, "you don't seem like a man who means harm. But you do seem like a man who's seen a lot." Marcus looked at him, his expression gentle but unreadable. "And what do you see, Daniel?" The young soldier swallowed. "I see someone who carries himself like he's been in command. Like he's led people before." A faint shadow of a smile touched Marcus's lips. "You notice much for one so young." Daniel shifted nervously. "Then who are you, really?" Marcus did not answer. Instead, he placed a steady hand on Daniel's shoulder, firm but kind. "In time, you'll know. For now, trust that I am not your enemy." With that, Marcus walked on, leaving the young soldier standing in quiet wonder. And though the rest of the town still saw only a stranger, one man had begun to sense the truth that Marcus Gray was not just another traveler. He was someone far more than they could imagine. The sky grew heavy with gray clouds that afternoon, and Ridgefield felt quieter than usual. The soldiers on patrol seemed restless, their eyes sharper, their movements quicker. Rumors spread through town that trouble might return, though no one could say from where. The townspeople stayed cautious, whispering as Marcus walked by. Marcus himself showed no sign of worry. His steps remained steady, his face calm, as if storms whether in the sky or in people's hearts could not touch him. But deep inside, he felt the weight of eyes always watching, always doubting. At the guard post near the square, the commander of the local unit, Captain Reeves, studied Marcus from a distance. Reeves was a man in his 40s, tall and strict, known for trusting suspicion more than trust. He had heard his men talk about Marcus, his silence, his calmness, the way he seemed to carry hidden authority. Reeves did not like mysteries. "Bring him in," Reeves ordered. Two soldiers left at once, their boots echoing across the pavement as they went to find Marcus. They spotted him walking near the library and approached with stiff steps. "Mr. Gray," one called, "Captain Reeves would like a word." Marcus looked at them quietly. His eyes softened, but his voice remained steady. "Very well." They led him to the guard station, a small brick building filled with maps, radios, and tired soldiers drinking coffee. Captain Reeves stood near the desk, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You've been here a few days now," Reeves began, his tone firm. "People don't know you, and in times like these, not knowing is dangerous. So I'll ask plainly, who are you, Marcus Gray?" Marcus looked at him, unblinking. "I am a man who has walked many roads." Reeves frowned. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one you need for now," Marcus replied softly. The captain's jaw tightened. "You think you can play games with me? I've seen men like you before. You hide your past, stay too quiet, make people uneasy. That usually means trouble." For a moment, silence filled the room. Soldiers shifted uncomfortably, waiting for Marcus to react. But Marcus did not raise his voice, did not flinch. He only said, "And sometimes, Captain, the men you mistrust are the very ones who stand ready to protect you." Reeves's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, the radio on the desk crackled. A voice burst through with urgency, "Patrol 2 reporting possible threat near the North Road. We've got an abandoned truck, wires inside. Could be dangerous." The room grew tense at once. Reeves snapped into command. "Lock down the square. Move 2 teams now." Soldiers rushed out, gathering their gear. Reeves turned to Marcus, irritation and suspicion mixing in his eyes. "Stay here." But Marcus had already moved closer to the map on the wall. His finger touched the North Road, tracing the surrounding fields. His voice came calm, but filled with certainty. "If it's where I think it is, you should not send 2 teams through the main road. It's open ground. If there's danger, they'll have no cover." Reeves looked at him sharply. "And how would you know that?" Marcus's gaze lifted to his. "Because I've seen traps set like this before. Too many times." The room fell silent again. The young soldier, Daniel, who had spoken with Marcus before, stepped forward. "Captain, maybe we should listen. He sounds like he knows what he's talking about." Reeves hesitated, torn between pride and caution. Finally, he snapped, "Fine. What do you suggest?" Marcus leaned over the map. His finger pointed to a wooded path. "Send a smaller unit through here, flank the road from the east. Keep another team back until you know more. Don't crowd the truck. If it's dangerous, distance saves lives." The captain studied him, searching his face. Marcus's calm eyes revealed no fear, only the quiet certainty of experience. Reeves finally gave a sharp nod. Do it. The orders were given, and soldiers moved fast. Minutes later, reports came back through the radio. Sir, the truck was wired, just like he said. But we approached from the east safe distance. Nobody hurt. The room exhaled in relief. Reeves turned slowly toward Marcus, his face unreadable. You're no ordinary traveler. Marcus did not answer. He only stepped back, his hands folded behind him. Daniel spoke softly, almost with awe. Sir, you saved lives. Marcus's gaze remained steady, his voice calm but distant. Lives are always worth saving. For a long moment, the room was quiet. The soldiers looked at him differently now, not only with suspicion but with respect. Yet Reeves's eyes still held questions, sharp and unrelenting. I don't know who you are, Gray, the captain said slowly, but I will find out. And until then, you're staying under watch. Marcus gave a slight nod. Do as you must. He turned and walked out, his steps as steady as ever. Outside, the sky was darker now, the wind stronger. He could feel the weight of what was coming. Ridgefield was not just a resting place anymore. His presence here had already begun to change the balance. And though the soldiers did not yet know the full truth, the first glimpse had been revealed. Marcus Gray was no simple wanderer. He was a man forged in shadows, a man who had commanded warriors in the most hidden corners of the world. But for now, he carried that truth alone. The night was quiet in Ridgefield, but inside Marcus's small inn room, sleep did not come easily. He sat by the window, the curtain half open, watching the empty street under a pale moon. His jacket lay folded neatly on the chair, his boots placed carefully by the door. Old habits never left him. His mind, however, wandered far from Ridgefield. Memories came uninvited, sharp as the edge of a blade. He closed his eyes, and in the silence, the past returned. He was no longer Marcus Gray the traveler. He was Commander Gray of Delta Force, standing in a tent lit only by a single lamp, maps spread before him, the air heavy with tension. Young soldiers looked at him, their faces filled with both fear and trust. Orders, sir, one asked. Marcus remembered how he had spoken, his voice steady though the mission ahead was dangerous. We go in silent, we come out together. No one left behind. He remembered the weight of their eyes, the way they believed in him more than in themselves. That belief had carried them through dark jungles, across deserts, and into cities where danger hid in every shadow. His mind shifted again, this time to the roar of helicopters slicing through the night sky. The ground below had been alive with fire and noise. He could still feel the vibration of the metal floor under his boots, the way his heart beat not with fear but with focus. Every decision had meant lives. Every choice had carved itself into him. And then the silence after. Missions completed, soldiers counted, some missing. The victories were never loud. They were quiet, heavy, carried inside the heart. Marcus opened his eyes and let out a long breath. He had left that world behind, yet it never left him. He had walked through places most people could not imagine, fought battles that would never be written in books. And now, here he was, in a small town where suspicion followed him like a shadow. A knock at the door pulled him back to the present. He stood, his steps quiet, and opened it. On the other side was Daniel, the young soldier. Sorry to bother you, sir, Daniel said softly. I couldn't sleep either. Marcus studied him for a moment, then stepped aside. Come in. Daniel entered nervously, removing his helmet and holding it against his chest. He looked around the simple room before sitting on the edge of the chair. You don't have to answer, Daniel began, but I know you're more than what you say. The way you looked at that map earlier, the way you gave those orders. I've never seen anyone speak with that kind of certainty. It reminded me of my training, but stronger. Like you'd lived it 1,000 times. Marcus stayed quiet, his hands folded. Daniel lowered his voice. Were you, military? Marcus's eyes met his, calm and steady. For a long moment, no words came. Then, finally, Marcus said, yes. Daniel sat straighter. What branch? Marcus shook his head gently. That doesn't matter now. But it does, Daniel insisted. Captain Reeves doesn't trust you. The others think you're hiding something dangerous. But if they knew, he stopped, uncertain. Marcus's voice was soft, but carried weight. If they knew, Daniel, they would see a man who has done things he cannot speak of. They would see battles that never made the news, sacrifices no one will ever honor. And they would not understand. Sometimes silence is not hiding. It is protecting others from truths too heavy to carry. Daniel swallowed hard, unsure what to say. Marcus leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Daniel. Why did you join the guard? The young soldier looked down at his helmet. My father served. I wanted to follow him. I thought it would make me braver. Marcus nodded slowly. And has it? Daniel hesitated, then whispered, sometimes. But sometimes, I still feel like a boy pretending to be a soldier. Marcus's expression softened. He placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, steady and kind. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward even when fear is heavy. Remember that. Daniel looked up, his eyes shining with respect. You talk like a commander. Marcus gave a faint smile. Old habits. For a moment, silence filled the room again. Then Daniel stood. Thank you, sir. I won't say anything. But I want you to know, I trust you. Marcus nodded. That trust will mean more than you know, one day. Daniel left quietly, closing the door behind him. Marcus sat back down, staring once more out the window. His heart felt both heavy and light. Heavy with the memories of his past, light with the knowledge that at least one young soldier had begun to see him for who he was. Yet he knew suspicion still lingered. Captain Reeves would not let go easily. The town would not stop watching. And sooner or later, something would happen that would force the truth into the open. For now, Marcus sat in silence, the moonlight falling across his face, his mind caught between the shadows of yesterday and the uncertainty of tomorrow. And though no one else could see it, the quiet traveler in Ridgefield carried the weight of a commander who had walked through fire and returned with scars unseen. The morning began quietly, but Ridgefield did not stay calm for long. Clouds hung low, and the air felt heavy, as if the town itself expected something to go wrong. Soldiers moved through the streets with nervous energy, their radios crackling more than usual. Marcus walked slowly along the edge of the square, watching the movement. His senses were sharp, trained to notice small details others missed. And he noticed it now the way two soldiers suddenly broke into a run toward the northern road, the sudden urgency in their faces. Moments later, the alarm sounded. Suspicious package. Everyone clear the square, a soldier shouted. Panic swept through the townspeople. Mothers grabbed their children, shopkeepers pulled down shutters, and people ran in every direction. Soldiers tried to push back the crowd, their voices lost in the storm of fear. Marcus stood still for a moment, his eyes narrowing. He could already see the problem, the soldiers were spreading too thin, shouting without order. Fear was ruling the moment, not discipline. That was dangerous. Captain Reeves appeared, barking commands, but the soldiers were too scattered to follow clearly. The square filled with chaos. And then, as if the situation were not already heavy, a truck at the far end of the street suddenly caught fire. Smoke rose fast, and the crowd screamed louder. Someone fell in the rush. A child cried out, separated from her mother. Soldiers froze, unsure whether to deal with the fire, the package, or the panicked civilians. Marcus moved. His voice cut through the noise, deep, steady, commanding. Form a line. Clear the civilians to the east side, now. The nearest soldiers, startled, turned toward him. His tone was not a suggestion, it was an order. Something in it made them move without thinking. They formed quickly, guiding the people in one direction instead of scattering them across the square. The panic began to steady. Marcus grabbed the hand of the crying child and lifted her into his arms. His eyes scanned the crowd until he spotted the desperate mother. With long steps, he carried the child through the rush and placed her safely in her mother's arms. Stay calm. Stay together, Marcus said firmly before turning back to the soldiers. The fire from the truck spread, heat rising in the air. Reeves was shouting orders, but his words tangled with the chaos. Marcus stepped beside him, his calm voice stronger. Captain, pull your men back from the truck. Flames mean danger. Keep one team on the north road, but get the others to secure the square. Reeves glared at him, his pride stung. You don't give my men orders. Marcus's eyes met his, unshaken. Then you do it? But do it fast, or you'll lose control. Reeves hesitated, then gave the very orders Marcus had spoken. The soldiers obeyed, and at once the confusion began to fade into structure. Civilians were moved safely. A fire team worked carefully to control the blaze. The square, once chaos, now moved with direction. Daniel rushed up, his face flushed. Sir Marcus, whatever you want me to call you, what about the package on the road? Marcus's eyes turned north. He thought quickly. Too risky to approach directly. You'll need a safe perimeter. No one within 50 yards until it's checked. Daniel nodded and hurried off, his respect for Marcus growing with every word. For the next hour, Marcus moved among soldiers and civilians alike, calm and steady. He spoke few words, but each carried weight. His presence steadied hands, cleared fear, and guided actions. Where Reeves's orders had stumbled, Marcus's guidance had cut like a blade through confusion. When at last the fire was contained and the suspicious package secured, the square grew quiet again. Smoke still lingered, but the danger had passed. Civilians gathered in small groups, whispering about the tall man who had taken charge. Soldiers looked at him differently now, not just as a stranger, but as a leader who had saved them from disaster. Captain Reeves stood stiffly, his pride wounded but his eyes unsettled. He walked up to Marcus. You took command as if this was your post. Marcus looked at him calmly. I took no command. I gave direction when it was needed. That is all. Reeves's jaw tightened. Who are you really? Marcus did not answer. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the horizon, where the smoke from the fire drifted into the sky. Who I am does not matter. What matters is that your men and your people are safe. Daniel stepped forward, his voice almost a whisper. You were in command before, weren't you? Not here, but somewhere. You've led men like us. Marcus's eyes softened. Yes. I have. The square grew quiet as those words sank in. Soldiers looked at him with new respect, though they still did not know the full truth. Reeves's suspicion remained, but even he could not deny what had just happened. Without Marcus, the day could have ended in disaster. As the people slowly returned to their homes, Marcus walked back toward the inn. His steps were steady, his face calm, but inside he knew what this meant. He had not wanted to reveal himself, not here, not like this. But leadership was not something one could hide when lives were at stake. And now, the guard, the townspeople, and even Captain Reeves knew this much. At least Marcus Gray was no ordinary man. The question that hung heavy in the air was simple: just how much more was he hiding? The morning after Marcus's identity was revealed, Ridgefield woke to a new sense of calm. People moved through the streets more carefully now, but with curiosity instead of fear. The story of the stranger who had taken charge during the fire and who had once commanded Delta Force spread quickly among townspeople and soldiers alike. Marcus walked along the edge of the town square, his jacket neatly folded over one arm. He noticed children watching him from a distance, their wide eyes filled with awe, not fear. Some adults whispered in small groups, still uncertain, but respect laced their voices. At the guard post, Captain Reeves stood by the window, watching Marcus approach. There was tension in the air, but Reeves no longer carried suspicion, only a heavy mix of humility and admiration. "Commander Gray," Reeves called, though his voice was softer than usual. Marcus stopped a few steps from the post. "Captain Reeves," he replied calmly. Reeves stepped outside. "You could have stayed quiet, but you didn't. You saved lives yesterday, and you've earned the respect of every soldier under my command." Marcus's eyes softened. "I did what needed to be done. That is all any of us can do in times of danger." Reeves nodded slowly. "Still, I owe you an apology. For doubting you, for questioning your presence. I judged without knowing. And that was wrong." Marcus gave a faint smile, not proud, but kind. "We all judge. What matters is learning from it." Daniel, standing behind Reeves, stepped forward. "Sir. I mean Marcus. I want to thank you for teaching me what courage really looks like." Marcus shook his head gently. "No one teaches courage. It lives inside you. My job was only to remind you of what you already had." The soldiers in the yard looked on, a mixture of awe and respect on their faces. They no longer saw a stranger in their midst, they saw a man who had lived with responsibility heavier than most could imagine, a man whose silence had been strength, not hiding. Reeves cleared his throat. "Marcus, will you stay in Ridgefield? The town could use someone like you. Not as a soldier, not as a commander, but as a mentor, a guide." Marcus looked toward the horizon, thinking quietly. For years, he had carried missions across distant lands. He had commanded men through danger, always moving forward, never looking back. Now, in Ridgefield, he had a chance to walk among people who had seen only a piece of him but who might learn to see more. "I will stay," he said finally. "Not to command, but to help in ways I can. To teach patience, calm, and readiness. To remind people that courage is quiet before it is loud." The town square began to fill with people, shopkeepers, children, and even those who had whispered doubts before. They stood at a respectful distance, waiting for Marcus to speak. He stepped onto the small platform near the fountain, a natural presence commanding attention without effort. "Yesterday," he began, his voice clear and steady, "we faced fear together. And we faced it well. Not because I acted alone, but because every soldier, every citizen, every young person here showed courage." The crowd listened, silent, captivated. "I do not seek praise," Marcus continued. "I am no stranger to challenges, but this town has shown me something important. Hope is strongest when people stand together, when we trust one another. Even in fear, we can act with calm and care. That is what matters." Daniel stepped beside him, inspired by the words. "We will remember that, sir," he said softly. Marcus nodded. "Remember it not for me, but for yourselves. Courage, trust, and calm, those are the real strengths. They live inside each of you." The crowd erupted in quiet applause, a mix of gratitude and newfound respect. Children waved shyly, soldiers straightened their posture, and even Captain Reeves looked as if a weight had lifted from his shoulders. Later that day, Marcus walked through the streets, greeting townspeople and sharing quiet words of encouragement. He helped a shopkeeper repair a broken fence, showed children how to fold flags properly, and offered guidance to young soldiers practicing drills in the yard. By evening, Richfield felt changed. Fear had been replaced by respect. Doubt had been replaced by trust. And Marcus Gray, once a stranger, then a mysterious leader, had become a symbol of courage and humility. As the sun set, painting the sky in soft orange and pink, Marcus stood at the edge of the square, watching the town he had protected. His heart was calm. For the first time in a long while, he felt the peace he had sought. Not because his past was forgotten, but because it had been accepted, and he had chosen to use it wisely. Captain Reeves approached one final time. "You've taught more than I imagined. Not just the soldiers, but me too." Marcus smiled softly. "Then the lesson is complete." And with that, Marcus turned, walking back toward his inn, the quiet hero of Richfield. His journey was far from over, but for now, the town knew what he had always known, that true courage is quiet, steady, and often unseen, but it leaves a mark that never fades. Richfield slept that night with a new feeling in its heart: safety, respect, and hope. And somewhere in the quiet of the inn, Marcus Gray rested too, finally at peace, knowing he had made a difference not by the battles he fought abroad, but by the lives he saved at home.